Okay, Jennifer Peterson, Mass Waterworks Association, and after Jennifer, we have Robert Little and Renee Lanning.
Thanks, Stephanie. My name is Jennifer Peterson. I'm the Executive Director of Mass Waterworks Association. Mass Waterworks is a nonprofit membership organization representing the public water systems in the Commonwealth. Our members' mission and our water suppliers' mission is to promote and protect public health through sufficient supplies of drinking water to their consumers. Our water systems are licensed professionals. They work hard each day to provide this essential service. Mass Waterworks firmly believes that any new drinking water standard must be developed through a transparent process that relies on strong scientific foundation, involves key stakeholders, evaluates the cost-benefit of the proposal, and evaluates the effectiveness of the regulatory action in achieving better public health outcomes. With respect to emerging contaminants such as PFAS, it's particularly important for MassDEP to take a deliberative approach as our understanding of the health risks of these substances is continually evolving. We do have some concerns with the petition by CLF for a treatment technique standard. Treatment technique standard is warranted when it's not economically or technologically feasible to ascertain an appropriate level for establishing an MCL. While setting individual MCLs for each of the more than 3,000 distinct PFAS compounds would not be feasible, establishing an MCL for PFAS as a class based on the best available peer-reviewed science should be achievable. The Safe Drinking Water Act already regulates some contaminants as class of compounds. The major issue with the treatment technique approach is establishment of a trigger requiring implementation of a prescribed treatment process. The process of finding the right trigger level is quite similar to the MCL process, so why not just pursue the MCL? Further, a treatment technique standard for drinking water puts the onus and cost solely on the public water supplier. Treating contaminated water at the source does not prevent the continued contamination of the Commonwealth's aquifers and surface waters. Regulatory controls need to be put in place to prevent PFAS from contaminating our water supplies. Such controls should include, but may not be limited, to regulations to prevent the manufacturing and use of PFAS, setting pre-treatment standards for industrial users, setting limits for land application of sludges, controlling air emissions, and establishing groundwater standards for cleanup. Mass Waterworks has always believed that it's in the best interest of the water suppliers across the Commonwealth to follow the EPA prescribed process for setting a regulatory standard. There is a consistent protocol in doing so, and it helps with the public's understanding of the issues. It gets very confusing among the public when we have different standards in different states, so it makes sense for EPA to take the lead on this and address it in a national way. They have started that with a national strategy, and we are certain that they will continue looking at the PFAS compounds. As was said in the opening remarks, PFAS compounds can be found in a number of products that consumers use daily. Although PFOA and PFAS have been phased out of production in the United States, there are many thousands of alternative PFAS in use, and many more are being imported into the country. When considering the levels often found in drinking water and the amount of water actually consumed, drinking water may only be a small fraction of the overall human exposure to PFAS. MassDEP should identify all other points of exposure for PFAS and publicize a list of products along with the typical levels found in those products. Of course, the best way to reduce overall exposure to PFAS is to remove the products from the marketplace. However, in the interim, public education may be a more effective tool for reducing a person's exposure. I want to talk a little bit about analytical capabilities, because while we're finding these compounds at such low levels, it doesn't always necessarily translate to a health risk. And we firmly believe there needs to be a robust look at the toxicological studies that have been done, and the DEP should perhaps commence future studies on the toxicological impact. These studies should focus on human health impact. Just to put in perspective, we're talking about parts per trillion. I just wanted to give you an analogy on that. Part per trillion is one drop in an Olympic-sized pool. An Olympic pool holds about 660,000 gallons of water. That equates to 10.56 million 8-ounce glasses of water. So we really need to look at this in terms of the impact that we're seeing through drinking water versus the other points of exposure. If MassDEP chooses to set an MCL for PFAS, we would ask that the process be dictated by science It must look at the effectiveness of treatment, the cost impacts for all size water systems. A thorough cost-benefit analysis must be done as is required by the Safe Drinking Water Act. The final MCL should be based not only on health impacts, but also economic impacts of treatment, public health benefits to be derived. It must consider uncertainties in the analysis of health risk, evaluation of health benefits from treatment, and related costs. We are especially concerned to the impact of small systems. I think Westfield said it quite nicely today. These are expensive systems to install, and so we need to have certainty for our communities. Finally, just some implementation pieces. Because of the ubiquitous nature of PFAS, we are concerned that proper sample protocols be put in place, and I think DEP needs to provide sample protocols to our water systems because at the parts per trillion level, environmental impacts could really impact a sample. And so I urge DEP to take some time to think about sampling protocols, and also if we move towards the MCL process, making sure that the labs are accredited in Massachusetts, which they're currently not, and that they have a method that is standardized, and that the labs have the capacity to deal with the samples that are coming in. So thank you for the opportunity to comment, and we certainly look forward to working with MassDEP as this moves forward.
Thank you. I would like to invite Robert Little of Woodard and Curran to come up and speak. After Robert, we will hear from Renee Lanny and Mary Jones.
Can everybody hear me all right? Morning to MassDEP, members of the water supply community, and concerned citizens, and thank you to the department for hosting this event. My name is Robert Little. I'm a drinking water practice leader for Woodard and Curran, environmental engineering consulting firm. My family and I live in Massachusetts. I'm a licensed engineer, professional engineer in 5 states, and have been a PA in the Commonwealth since 1999. So greatly appreciate the opportunity to provide these comments, and I applaud and support DEP's tremendous responsibility in their efforts to protect public health and the environment. On behalf of my firm, the drinking water industry, and myself as a father of 2 young children, I think this is a critically important issue. So I'm here to support the drinking water profession and the protection of public health. Myself and thousands of engineers, scientists, public works and water department employees in Massachusetts have dedicated their entire professional careers to the treatment and distribution of a sufficient supply of clean, safe drinking water. In the continued effort to balance the protection of public health and the costs associated with achieving compliance with new regulations, I respectfully ask that the department consider the following facts as they pertain to PFAS. Number one, Environmental Protection Agency has issued a lifetime health advisory of 70 parts per trillion, quoting from EPA, to provide Americans, including the most sensitive populations, with a margin of protection from a lifetime exposure of PFOA and PFAS in drinking water. EPA has established a health advisory level at 70 parts per trillion. So what's this mean? It means that this threshold is based on peer-reviewed science, based on EPA's. It also means that EPA made a series of conservative assumptions in the setting of that limit. Number two, another fact is that EPA and MassDEP have a clear and defined process for setting of MCLs in drinking water. That process involves an evaluation of suspected health risks, cost-benefit analysis, and treatment technologies. In the case of PFAS, the majority of related studies have been conducted in rodents. Epidemiological studies and primate studies have often contradicted those findings. So clearly, and I agree with the Conservation Law Foundation at this point, more study is needed. Number four, the for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry and the CDC. Across the U.S., human blood levels for PFAS have gone down significantly since phase-out of consumer products containing these compounds began, indicating the likely predominant contribution to body burdens of PFAS from consumer products versus drinking water. And lastly, while treatments for the removal of these substances from drinking water, there can be significant cost associated with the construction of new facilities, as well as the ongoing operation and maintenance of these processes. As an example, membrane and reverse osmosis treatment can be very energy intensive, and each would create a waste stream or reject stream with higher concentrations of these compounds, So in closing, all of us as thought leaders in the development of appropriate standards for PFAS and other future or emerging contaminants must consider the multiple pathways of exposure and scientifically evaluate the incremental benefits in conjunction with usability and cost. The regulatory levels should be based on peer-reviewed literature and toxicity studies with a preference for epidemiological studies and meta-analysis of those studies. We're talking about parts per trillion, and while treatment technologies exist, such as granular activated carbon, ion exchange, nanofiltration, reverse osmosis, they're capable of removing PFAS to very low levels. There comes that cost. Public health protection is the foremost responsibility of public water supply professionals and the regulatory community. However, the cost-benefit of regulatory requirements is also essential in establishing an appropriate PFAS limit. The lower the limit, the higher the cost. Financial resources are also necessary to protect public health, and are spent on achieving increasingly stringent PFAS limits is one that can't be used to rehabilitate antiquated infrastructure, update aging treatment facilities, replace distribution piping systems that are in many cases over 100 years old. It's imperative that we get this right, and that standards be set. But I respectfully ask that states process the determination of an appropriate MCL based on scientific fact, sound estimates of adverse health effects, and consider the cost to the ratepayers. This hearing is an excellent opportunity for engagement by the stakeholders, and I certainly hope to have future similar engagement. I'm sure that with a robust process in place, a process that does currently exist, and with supporting science, can develop an appropriately stringent regulatory framework under which the drinking water professionals in the Commonwealth can operate. Thank you.
So next we will hear from Renee Lani of the American Chemistry Council, next from Mary Jones, and after that from Lori Nearing.
Good morning. My name is Renee Laney, and I'm here on behalf of the American Chemistry Council, or ACC. First, I'd like to thank Massachusetts for providing this opportunity to comment on this petition. ACC believes that it is important for Massachusetts to prioritize and limit the exposure to health-based levels of PFAS of concern in drinking water. As already noted today, commercial cleanup technologies exist to remove PFAS of concern from water. And AC encourages Massachusetts to utilize these technologies to remove PFAS of concern. However, a treatment technique drinking water standard is not appropriate for PFAS as a class. No evidence suggests that low levels of all PFAS compounds pose a threat to human health, and analytical techniques do not exist to detect all PFAS. Quantifying total fluorine is not an appropriate way to determine PFAS content, and summation methods or artificial oxidation are not appropriate when trying to extrapolate water tests to health effects for risk assessment. It is inappropriate to regulate PFAS as a class, because not all PFAS are the same. PFAS can bioaccumulation, potential, use, etc. And there's data to support that different chain lengths results in different properties. Fluoropolymers are PFAS that are high molecular weight molecules that are too large to be bioavailable, they're not toxic, not extremely stable, and present no significant risk to human health or the environment. Today's PFAS are essential to many important products and applications, including medical devices, semiconductors, and first responder protective equipment. Furthermore, not only do short chain replacements have improved toxicity profiles of PFAS, such as PFOA and PFAS, but they are also just effective and do not need to be used in larger quantities to provide the same performance. EPA has also taken meaningful action to help the public understand and address exposure to PFAS of concern. As noted, they've established a health advisory for PFAS and PFOA. They've also led a voluntary phase-out of legacy PFAS, in which all U.S. manufacturers of fluorotechnology have stopped manufacturing and using long-chain PFAS in the U.S., EU, and Japan because of concerns that were raised. And this has, as was mentioned previously, led to significant decline in PFAS and PFOA in blood levels. EPA is also monitoring PFAS in the contaminant candidate list and are working towards a regulatory determination on whether there is a need for a federal maximum contaminant level, or MCL. EPA had many affected communities to provide a forum for information exchange. They've also generated draft toxicity values for Gen X and PFBS, which illustrate less toxicity than PFOA and PFAS. They've developed cleanup values for surface and groundwater, which are currently undergoing review in the Office of Management and Budget, and a management plan is expected to be released soon after the government shutdown is resolved. Furthermore, ongoing work to improve analytical capabilities, including water methods that will help fill data needs. New Hampshire was recently faced with a similar petition and chose not to act on it. And they cited activities, EPA activities, and a prematureness to initiate rulemaking without appropriate sound scientific data. ACC supports the regulation of PFAS chemicals of concern on a sound science and risk basis. Not all PFAS pose a risk to human health or the environment to the same degree. Encourage Massachusetts to focus its time and resources on those PFAS that present the greatest potential risk. Any technical standard should be determined through a robust rulemaking process that takes into account appropriate stakeholder input, particularly regarding science and health risk reduction trade-offs. And we look forward to being a proactive stakeholder with Massachusetts DEP moving human health or the environment to the same degree. And we encourage Massachusetts to focus its time and resources on those PFAS that present the greatest potential risk. Any technical standard should be determined through a robust rulemaking process that takes into account appropriate stakeholder input, particularly regarding science and health risk reduction trade-offs. Thank you, and we look forward to being a proactive stakeholder with Massachusetts.